What's up, guys, and welcome back to Three Gyms Talk Hockey. I'm your host, Saul Mijas, alongside Mike Cardoza and Matt Milko. We have episode 3 on deck. A lot to talk about from the U.S.-Canada championship game, which we were fortunate enough to be in attendance for, into NHL news, how every team's been doing since the Four Nations break. Additionally, we're going to get a little bit into the NHL trade deadline, which is going to be a week from tomorrow, February 28th. So a lot to cover. And then to end the show, we got some Division I Sacred Heart hockey talk as both teams are looking into heading into the playoffs in the coming weeks. But right off the bat, USA-Canada, Four Nations title game. USA is looking for the first gold medal since 1996. Canada's looking to continue their dominance over international hockey. First best-on-best tournament we've had since 2016. We got really in-depth in it last week. But first comes first. I want to hear about both of your experiences. How was it? Was it everything you wanted?
Well, I think that this was one of the most anticipated games, and I don't even know how long. I mean, I've heard it be compared to almost the Miracle on Ice game, so I was I know all three of us were super excited to go. I definitely think it lived up to the hype. The game was fast. It was physical. And very tactical overall. You saw both teams really having to put all their bodies on the line to win this game. Unfortunately, there was a few injuries. Matthew Tkachuk got held out. His minutes were short. I think he might have played like one shift in the third period.
Not even.
So I think that hurt the team a little bit. But overall, that was probably one of the best games I'll ever see in person in my life.
Yeah, it was an insane game. We were lucky enough to see it, and honestly, it lived up to all expectations, all the hype from the first drop. Every single fan was in it. I couldn't remember the last game I've been to where every single shot on goal, you heard the crowd go, ooh. Every single play, there was a reaction, and I loved it, and I think every single fan in that stadium loved it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I think that game 100% lived up to the expectations. We witnessed what is going to quite possibly go down as one of the greatest games of hockey in terms of talent that will ever be constructed. So let's get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of that game. Start from the top. Obviously, Charlie McAvoy was not dressing in this game because of his shoulder injury, which led to infection and whatnot. Who other than, obviously, we had Sanderson replace McAvoy. A lot of people were kind of questioning what he would add to the team or bring to the table. I mean, obviously, there wasn't much of a question that he's a great player. I mean, you don't get named to Team USA for being a nobody. But overall, Quinn Hughes was in discussions to join Team USA. Comes out that he's not able to join the team unless there's another injury. Now all of a sudden, people are speculating that Jake Sanderson might get food poisoning out of nowhere. And Quinn Hughes would be able to play, but that obviously didn't happen. Quinn Hughes didn't even travel to Boston because it didn't make any sense due to Vancouver's regular season schedule. So right off the bat, Charlie McAvoy, big asset in their win against Canada earlier in the tournament. He's out. But now looking at the Canada side, Cale Makar, who wasn't dressing during their first matchup, is now in the lineup, which that's a negative for the U.S., a positive for Canada right off the rip. But all in all, the game was really, really big anticipated. I don't think I've seen a hockey game this widely anticipated since ever, quite honestly. So we had those two plus minuses, but right into the nitty gritty, this game was off to a hot start. From the warm-ups, we walked into the building, it was electric. I don't think a single person was sitting. I've never seen that many people in an arena for warm-ups. We had people dressing up. We had people yelling, smiling, laughing, crying right off the doors opening. So a lot of anticipation. The both anthems being sung went crazy. It was honestly one of the coolest experiences I could have possibly hoped for. But the U.S. gets crapped on right away. McKinnon, from the point, puts it right through a screen. Canada goes 1-0, goes up 1-0. What was that moment like for the two of you just kind of being there next to me?
Well, it's kind of how the tournament's been going for the U.S. They've been down. They typically would be down starting the game. I mean, it's really hard to shut down a guy like McKinnon. He, by far, I think, had the best tournament out of the pool of players. He was dominant, picked up right where he left off with the Avs, and I wasn't too worried about it because you look at our roster. I don't think there was any doubt that our team was going to respond. Obviously, having an X factor player like McAvoy out does hurt us, but at the end of the day, most of the forwards were healthy, and I think the way that the U.S. has been able to battle adversity, especially in the first game when we also went down, I think there was anticipation from most of the United States fans that we were going to respond next, and we did.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I think right off the bat, both teams came out flying. It wasn't quite what we saw in the first game with 3 fights in 9 seconds, but both teams very into the game off the bat. You obviously have Connor Hellebuyck's been playing an unbelievable tournament for the U.S. Binnington's been surpassing all expectations. There was a lot of questions surrounding Canada's goaltending, but both goalies really came out to play. I was actually watching a video last week, and one key point that they kind of pointed out was how Hellebuyck, his goals allowed above expected was just above average when facing a shot from the point when he screened. The Avalanche really proved that over the playoffs last year, and who other than Nathan MacKinnon just exposing Hellebuyck in that arguably might be one of the few weaknesses in his game. Yeah. So I think that both teams really did their homework. Canada knew what to do to score on Hellebuyck. The U.S. knew what to do to contain Canada, not only from the first game, but just from film. I mean, you have some of the fastest players, the best skaters on the team on that Canadian team, so the U.S. really had to do their homework and figure out a way to trap Canada the best that they could, not let them get going, because once they get going, it's going to be hard to stop. But one thing that I want to point out is along this game, or prior to the game, we obviously knew Kyle Connor was going to be a healthy scratch, was going to be the U.S.'s healthy scratch for Chris Kreider. Throughout the game, obviously knowing what we know now, right decision or wrong decision?
I don't know. If you want, you could pull up how much ice time Chris Kreider got, but I feel like I didn't really notice Kreider at all. Also, Kyle Connor played a couple games before the championship final, and Kyle Connor was pretty irrelevant on the ice. I didn't recognize him, and I know he wasn't getting a lot of shifts either, which is pretty surprising for Kyle Connor. Maybe one of the leading goal scorers in the NHL this year, not even getting a spot on the USA roster. But I don't mind the decision. Kreider brings something that Kyle Connor doesn't. Obviously, Connor is far exceptional of a player than Kreider is. It's just two different skill sets, how Canada brought in Sam Bennett and more physical guys to fill out their third and fourth line more than skill players, and that's what I think Mike Sullivan and the U.S. coaches were going for.
Yeah, no, I mean, to answer your question, Chris Kreider skated 6 minutes 25 seconds in the championship game, which is less than an injured Matty Tkachuk.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that was one of the biggest surprises of the game. Kyle Connor being a healthy scratch, I don't think anyone was really anticipating that. Chris Kreider did play a good game when he was involved in that third game against Sweden, but overall, I don't think many people were kind of anticipating that. I mean, Kyle Connor's playing on the best team in the NHL right now. Chris Kreider's been struggling for the most part of this season, so I think that really kind of opened up my eyes, and more in a sense of what is Mike Sullivan and the coaching staff trying to get at with this move. But at the same time, you're right. You got to balance out your lineup. Kyle Connor may have not been doing what they wanted him to do, which sometimes that's behind the scenes stuff that we really can't get into because we don't know the details or the depths of things. But Dud, I kind of want to hear your thoughts on that healthy scratch.
I thought it was pretty controversial just because if I was Mike Sullivan, I definitely would have put Kyle Connor in the lineup. I mean, he's playing at such a higher level than Chris Kreider, especially this year. He's the leading point scorer or the second leading point scorer on the best team in the NHL. I think it's a wrong decision to keep him sidelined when I think he brings more to the table. Chris Kreider obviously offers physicality and veteran presence, but I think with Kyle Connor's offensive ability and the ability to create space in the O zone, I think I think it would have benefited to have him playing in that game rather than Kreider. I agree with their decision to put Kreider in against Sweden and get him some minutes. He did play a good game, but Connor played the first game. It worked out. I think USA should have stuck with what they did the first time rather than try to switch around the lineup, even if they feel like they might have seen something, but I think they should have definitely kept Connor in the lineup.
Yeah, no, and then obviously aside from that, we've kind of gotten to the nitty gritty of players that have been hurt, players that have come back. Obviously, Kyle Connor being a healthy scratch, but we kind of opened up with Nathan McKinnon opening up the scoring. Brady Tkachuk it was an Ottawa Senators show for Team USA. Brady Tkachuk and Jake Sanderson, both Ottawa Senators players, got the game tied, and then Sanderson with the go-ahead goal. Obviously, Brady Tkachuk has been a big name in this tournament, him and his brother, Matthew. They've been doing a lot, so I wasn't surprised to see Brady Tkachuk score a goal. Whether it's the first one or the last one, it doesn't matter. He scored a goal. I wasn't surprised about that. He really got the U.S. back into it. In the second period, Jake Sanderson gives the team a lead. I remember the building exploded. I've not been in a building that loud in quite some time. And the fact that it was Sanderson, I think, really shows a lot of character. Everything that was going around social media, everything that was being said, kind of hoping. I feel like a lot of people were hoping, even though it sucks to say, people were hoping that Sanderson would get hurt or something would come up and allow Quinn Hughes to take the spot of Charlie McAvoy. He went into this game, I feel like he had a lot of weight on his shoulders, as I assume most players would that are being treated the way that he was prior to this game. And he went out there, he played a hell of a game, gives the U.S. a lead, and now their sights are on defense to kind of maintain that lead and bring home their first senior men's gold. So overall, the U.S. really got depth, or they saw scoring depth from both ends, offense and defense. But overall, I don't think Canada played the same game that they did the first go-around. I think Canada really adjusted what they were doing. They kind of used the U.S.'s strategy against them, against the U.S. I feel like they played a good neutral zone trap. They didn't really allow the U.S. to get much going. And we saw that because by the end of the second period, it was a tied game 2-2, scored by one of the most hated men in Boston, Sam Bennett. Overall, that was absolutely exceptional. I feel like the third period through and through everyone was holding their breaths. Every shot, kind of like Dozer, you said before, everyone was just like, ooh, every time a shot was taken, whether it was from the outside the slot. And it was just an environment in that third period that is something I don't think any of us will ever really experience again.
I think that during that whole third period, everyone in the crowd kind of knew that the team to score the next goal was probably going to win. So that just built the anticipation. I also kind of want to dive into Canada a little bit. I mean, I can't imagine how fired up these players were just based off of all the media coverage that was being funneled into this game, talking about, oh, if Canada loses, they're going to become the 51st state. Seeing the statements that President Trump was making about this game, and the fact that they lost the first game as well, I would have loved to see the behind the scenes footage of what the leaders in that locker room were saying, like Crosby, McKinnon, McDavid, Makar, before that game started. Even Marchand in that locker room too, being a vet, playing in his building. So, I mean, everyone knew Canada was going to come out with guns blazing. So, back to the point, like, with all of that being said, a lot of guys on Canada stepped up big, and even some guys that you wouldn't expect, like Jordan Binnington, faced a lot of heat this tournament. I feel like most people disagreed with the decision to have him be the starter. And then when the lights are shining the brightest, I mean, he played spectacular and ultimately saved them the game in overtime. I know Brady Tkachuk had a golden opportunity.
I can count 3 times off the top of my head that he saved them.
And Binnington just shut them down. I don't know what it is with this guy, but Canada seemed to have made the right decision with not going with Aiden Hill. So,
Yeah, no, I mean, I think through and through, we watched a spectacular 40 minutes of hockey. We knew that last 20 minutes was going to be some of the most intense hockey we could possibly watch. We ended up getting free hockey. I think all of us prior to the game, we all said if we could get some free hockey out of this, that would ultimately be the goal. As long as the U.S. wins, unfortunately, they didn't. But we were hoping for some free hockey, and that's exactly what we got. And I think it was an incredible game to go into overtime. We obviously gave our score predictions prior to the game. We all said that it was going to be a one-goal game. Our scores were a little different, but we were all right in the fact that it was going to be a one-goal game. And who other than Connor McDavid? I mean, in 2010, it was Sidney Crosby. In 2025, it's Connor McDavid. A lot of people are comparing Connor McDavid's goal this year to Crosby's Olympic medal goal and saying that it's kind of a pass the torch kind of situation. When Crosby got asked about that, he was kind of just like, listen, like, I don't think it's a matter of passing the torch or any of that. It's about being happy for your teammates. Kind of you accomplish a goal with one another. And number one, I like that comparison. I mean, you don't get a lot of guys compared to Crosby. McDavid's one of those guys. I see the resemblance. But I also like what Crosby said because that almost feels like he's saying, I'm not done.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's not passing the torch. He'll be back. He'll be in Italy for the 2026 Olympics, and he'll definitely still be the captain on that team.
100%. I quite honestly think he might even still be there for the next four nations in 2028.
That would be crazy.
Or the World Cup of Hockey, whatever they're planning on having in
I think it's the World
2028.
Cup.
Yeah, the World Cup of Hockey. But long story short, if you're saying you're passing the torch to someone, you're pretty much saying, yeah, I'm done. And Crosby's far from done. So I'm really excited to see what's to come because the U.S. is really running up the ranks in terms of hockey. But Canada just proved this is still our sport. So the U.S. still has a lot to figure out and kind of accomplish before they really take that from Canada with certainty, I guess.
Yeah, I think the bigger thing in that is that the U.S. is coming, and that was almost like that wasn't even close to the peak potential of what we have, considering the guys we still have in the system that are so young and just going to keep getting better and better.
But then my whole argument is you could say the same with Canada.
You could. I'm just saying the U.S. is coming, man.
Yeah, no, I agree.
The U.S. is coming.
Listen, dude, I'm an American, so I agree with you through and through. I'm just saying if you're going to use that argument for one, you got to look at the other side because you got Bedard Celebrini, you got a Gavin McKenna who still hasn't even touched foot on NHL ice. So I'm excited to see what's coming out of both countries because I really think, not that it hasn't been an absolute war between the two teams for as long as it has, but I think it's going to get back to the peak of what it was back in '96, like the World Cup of Hockey. Like I remember. We weren't even born yet, but I look back at those rosters. I'm just like, wow, like imagine we had a chance to see those names on the same roster, and we just got to witness Crosby, McDavid, McKinnon, Makar all on the ice at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to look forward to, but we mentioned Crosby, and I want to get right into the NHL. We're just under a week back into the NHL regular season. On Saturday marked the first of the new start after the Four Nations break, and Pittsburgh came out exactly how they left off.
Yeah.
It was a rivalry game, Pittsburgh, Washington. Crosby came out flying, comes off of a gold medal, scores a goal. Game's 2-2 halfway through the second period, and Pittsburgh just says, you know what? Washington, you can take it. You guys are fresh. You guys are good. Washington takes it 8-2. Okay, Washington, we've spoken about this, but Washington didn't have a single player at the Four Nations. But what kind of message is that sent considering where Washington is right now in the NHL standings and where Pittsburgh is? Because I feel like a lot of guys feel like Crosby should still be on a team that's competing and Pittsburgh really isn't. And then Washington doesn't have any guys go to the Four Nations. They come out dominating, and they're on top of the East.
Yeah, I think these two teams are very similarly. We're in a position 4 years ago where they had Ovechkin, they had Crosby, and the rest of their team was kind of getting older, and they knew their window was shutting. And how it's crazy the two different managements, how the Capitals did a little retool, were bad for a couple years, and then now they're coming back and they're second in the league right now, first in the Eastern Conference. And on the flip side, the Penguins, they kept most of their old players. They re-signed them to contracts. They traded for Erik Karlsson, and now look, they're at the bottom of the team now. And I think we're gonna get into this later in the episode, is how the Penguins should be one of the biggest sellers at the trade deadline, and how they got to start doing what the Caps did a couple years ago and retool, which kind of sucks now for Crosby. Is it's a little too late for him, and I think he wants to stay on the Penguins, and he's just going to be on a team that's not going to be in the playoffs, which sucks for us as hockey fans. Is we hate it because he plays our teams in the East, but we love seeing Sidney Crosby in the playoffs, and he always has that magic in him to make a crazy run.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where you hate playing against them, but it's
Got
one of those
nothing but
talents.
respect,
It's a generational talent that you almost hate passing up on seeing extra hockey. I mean, we were fortunate enough to see, I believe it was 16 straight playoff appearances from Crosby. I mean, pretty much our whole lives we saw Crosby growing up in the playoffs. And now you still see him. He's still dominating, and he's on a team that's underperforming, not giving him what he needs to, I guess, succeed. And he's very easily still a player that you could build around and make something out of nothing. In his 20th season in the NHL, he's at 60 points in 58 games.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what Dozer said, that it is time for the Penguins to sell and try to retool some pieces, because they just don't look like a playoff team at all. And Crosby's still playing at a point per game pace, which is ridiculous. So they got to find a way to get some young players, some established players, or just get some picks, because with the pieces they have right now, I don't know whether it's the coaching scheme that Mike Sullivan's running or just the chemistry between the team. They just don't look collectively as a unit like a playoff team, or a team that's going to be ready for the playoffs anytime soon. So I think it's time to make a change and try to work some kinks out, because Crosby only has so many years left, and it would be a real shame if they wasted those years being a bottom of the barrel team.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. I think trading Crosby's not even in the cards. He's made it clear he wants to stay in Pittsburgh, so right now it's up to Pittsburgh, it's up to Kyle Dubas to really figure out what he wants to do and what direction he wants to bring this team. Because you got Kyle Dubas in Toronto, he's working with a lot of really young players. He had Austin Matthews, he had Mitch Marner, he had William Nylander, he had
Nice.
Well, now he has Matthew Nyes, but I'm saying, like, when he was really up and coming in the organization, that was his core.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like he knew he had X amount of years, but Crosby, you don't have that time. This is a right now, and right now you're bottom of the barrel team. Start moving your pieces. It's a business. Yes, most of these Penguins players, you had the trio of Crosby, Letang, and Malkin in Pittsburgh for over a decade. Is it time to move one of them? It might be, but instead he's going out saying, "Oh, I'll move Karlsson in a heartbeat." Meanwhile, Karlsson's contract is one of the hardest to move in the league, even with the cap going up.
It's tough. I don't know. I don't really know a lot of teams that are going to move for a guy like Evgeny Malkin or Chris Letang, based on their age and how many years they have left. I don't know if it makes sense for a lot of teams to go after guys like them. So I think it would be easier to move Karlsson than a guy like Malkin, who's really at the end of his career here. Even though the cap is, like, the cap hit is a lot. Yes, the cap is going up, so it does leave the door open for more opportunities for teams to try to jump in and get him.
No, it does, but that's what brings me to my point. Is the fact that I don't think a lot of teams will want to trade for Malkin or Letang. It's because right now their age, like, they're past the point of trading. But that's my point. Kyle Dubas has to figure out what way he could retool this team to really become a contender for Crosby's sake. But long story short, that's something Kyle Dubas has to figure out, and quite honestly, it's something that it hasn't really seemed that he's been able to figure out so far in his general managing career. because with Toronto, he was given a golden opportunity to not cakewalk his way to a ring, but really give himself the best chance for a ring. That now he's working kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum with Pittsburgh. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. But on the flip side of that game, yeah, the Capitals picking up right where they left off. The Capitals had a monster weekend. They played the Penguins on Saturday. On Sunday, they played the Oilers, and they put up 15 combined goals. They put up 8 against Pittsburgh. They put up 7 against Edmonton. Ovechkin, like we've been saying time and time again, ageless wonder. Potts a hat trick against Edmonton. I mean, you can't really ask for much more when it comes down to seeing players that we've grown up watching, kind of hoping to see them do what was once a dream. We're 13 Alex Ovechkin goals away from seeing an all-time record, a record that we thought would be unbroken. So I think that's really just something that we're going to look back at and be like, wow, like we were in college, like we remember this clearly. Like the NHL the goals record was broken when it was said it was looked to be unbreakable. And right in front of our eyes, we see a 39-year-old man scoring at the best goal scoring rate he's had his entire career.
Yeah, he's still at the top of his game, absolutely, which is crazy considering his age and kind of what transpired last season.
I was going to say, and considering that it was looked at that he was kind of on the downhill from a couple seasons ago.
Like the way last season went, it did not put him in a good media space perspective to think that he would even come close to being able to break it this year. I feel like it was conceived that almost if he wanted to break this record, he would have to play another 3 seasons just based on the pace he was at last year. And now we're fast forwarding to where we are at this point in the season, and I think all of us can say that he has a really, really good chance of breaking this record before the season ends.
Yeah, we were talking about it the other day. I think it's 12 goals, and they got 24 games left, so
yeah.
A goal every other game, and he ties it. That's tying the record, but it's still crazy that we're even witnessing this, and it's amazing for the NHL that they get to market this as a chase for the great one, as Ovechkin is chasing how, even if you don't know hockey at all, everybody knows who Wayne Gretzky is, and they know how dominant he was back in whenever he played.
Yeah, and to be completely honest with you, like, that's a very good point. The NHL is using this as a great marketing strategy because I feel like the NHL has some of the worst marketing out of every professional sports league. I think that's a given. Yeah. But using the Great Chase as something for just an average fan to follow along this historic run that Ovechkin's on, I think it's just awesome. Like, the Great 8, we got the Great Chase now. Like, he's chasing that unbeatable record. So, from a marketing standpoint, I think that hockey's honestly at a really good spot.
It is. It is,
like,
out of the 4 major sports, it is the only one I see is on the uprise right now. And it is on a fast track up, which is amazing for the sport. As the we already talked about this a lot last episode or 2 episodes ago. Cap's already going up a crazy amount, and now think about all the new viewers coming in from 4 nations, from all around the world, and now you got just casual Americans now just tuning in to watch Ovechkin break an unbreakable record.
That's exactly what I was going to say. From the 4 nations to the Great Chase to the way that Crosby's on a 2-decade run of just history to McDavid arguably being the best athlete in the world right now, to guys like Matthews putting up 69 goals. Like, this is the time to be a hockey fan right now. And then on top of it, we're getting a little off topic, so we'll shift right back to the NHL, but it's like talking NCAA with the CHL. It's like we've brought this up a couple times on this podcast. That's another thing that just brings hockey in the right light, which is really exciting to see because the direction of this sport is nothing in the negatives of what it used to be. Right now we're on the high rise, and I love seeing it. Obviously with the Olympics next year and what they hope to be more best on best tournaments, but going right into a different team that's really on the uprise and picking up right where they left off, the Winnipeg Jets. We kind of spoke about Connor Hellebuck a little bit earlier when we mentioned the 4 nations and some of his flaws, I guess, that were exposed. But when really looking at the whole Connor Hellebuck look, right now in the regular season, there's not a goalie that's anywhere near Connor Hellebuck in terms of stats or anything. He's in a league of his own. The last couple of years, you could have argued someone like Igor Shesterkin. A few years before that, Vasilevsky. Right now, it's Connor Hellebuck's NHL, and we're just living in it. I mean, Dud, you brought up a really, really good point that I didn't even realize, but Connor Hellebuck's right there sniffing on an NHL record, and I feel like it's not even being spoken about half as much as it should be. Through 45 games played this year, he has 36 wins. The NHL record for most wins in an NHL season, Marty Brodeur and Braden Holtby are tied with 48 wins, which is the most in an NHL season. We are just over the halfway mark, and this man needs 12 wins to tie it, 13 to take over. And knock on wood, no injuries. He's on pace to destroy that record. And I don't think if you're Winnipeg, I don't think you take him out of the net. I think you just let him ride. You don't see goalies going 36-7-2 through the 45 games, through half a season. 36 wins is more wins than a lot of teams get in an entire season.
I would personally, if I was Winnipeg, play it safe with him. I wouldn't give him I would load management him a little bit in the sense where they're in such a good space in the standings. If you look at where they are ranked right now in the Central, they're 11 points ahead of the Stars in first place.
I mean, they're 11 points ahead of anyone else in the West.
So
right now, the only team that's really competing against them is Washington.
So, yeah, I think going down this stretch, yeah, sure. Give him all the games. But as the season starts winding down, I would kind of taper him off a little bit. Like maybe give him every other game, and then maybe the last 2-3 games of the year, give him all 3 so he's ready for playoffs. But I would really be concerned about potential injury, and just based on how the Winnipeg Jets have kind of looked the last few times they've been in the playoffs, like I would want their best player 100% healthy and ready to go. And with the NHL, like anything can happen. I mean, we saw what happened to Jacob Markstrom get kind of ran over, and the injury's undisclosed, but he could be done up until playoffs, which is going to hurt the Devils a lot. It's an undisclosed injury, so we don't really know when he's going to be back. But you don't want something like that happening to Hellebuck in a game that they don't even necessarily need him to play. Because he's going to smash this record regardless.
I don't know about smash it, but I do agree with your point, especially, and I think it's mostly agree to the point is because of how the Jets looked the last 2 postseasons, especially at Hellebuck, as I don't think he should be playing every game, especially the last 2 weeks of the season. You need to give him a little bit of a rest, at least in my opinion, as I know the year that Shesterkin played like 65 games for the Rangers, he started off his playoffs the worst he's ever played in the playoffs before. So I think, especially Hellebuck struggled in the playoffs last year, I think they have to give him a little bit of a break. And I was checking Hellebuck's stats. I was the one who wrote that point of the 12 wins. I was checking his stats all day today. His goals saved above expected compared to the second guy. He's 10 goals above expect. These are advanced stats, but still, 10 goals above expected from the next highest guy is crazy.
Crazy.
We're 60 games through the year. Having 10 goals above the next guy is insane to me, and he's going to win Vezina without a doubt. I don't think
there's no shot.
Yeah. No, number one, there shouldn't be a question. Number two, I agree with the load management. The only thing that I'd say about that is I feel like, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I feel like the NHL has really shifted over to being really goalie tandem based. I feel like looking back at when a Marty Brodeur, Patrick Waugh, like a Hasek really dominated the league in net, those guys were playing 60, 70 games a season. And they were going on these incredible playoff runs, really helping their teams not only make those deep runs, but win cups. So I feel like if you ride the hot hand, load management him. If you're playing a non-playoff team, take him out. Let him take a night off. If they're playing a team that's like a Dallas, for example, I'd throw him in there because what are the chances that you face a Dallas team in the second round? Pretty high.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's more or less, yeah, load management, but I wouldn't shy away from playing him against every playoff team you play, or granted, it's not a back-to-back. You know what I mean? So I feel like there's a lot of ways to really go about it. And right now it's up to Hellbuck to make sure that he's taking care of his body, which it seems like he has. I feel like the Four Nations was a step in the right direction in terms of, you guys mentioned his last couple playoffs. The Four Nations was looked at by some NHL players as the biggest games that they've ever played. These are guys that have won Stanley Cups. These are guys that have won national titles. These are guys that have competed for the best of the best. And Hellbuck really did perform. I don't think he underperformed in that tournament by any means. So I feel like that's a step in the right direction. Kind of get his confidence up. If I could perform at that level against the league's best, I could do the same for my team in the NHL playoffs. So I hope that that's a step in the right direction for Hellbuck. But through and through, I think that's one stat. Dozer, I didn't mean to not give you credit. I didn't realize that was you, but that's something that was even overlooked by me. And when I saw that, I had to double check it. It was one of those things. I was like, wait, he hasn't even played 50 games yet. What do you mean he's 12 wins away from tying the record? So that was really an eye-opener for me, something that I didn't realize, something that should really be spoken about a little bit more. But long story short, I think not only is he a lock for the Vezina, I think he's in contention for the Hart. Like, I think that should almost be a given. You don't see goalies putting up that kind of numbers. But that's a team that's been playing good, that everyone knows has been playing good. A team that's been hot that a lot of people haven't been talking about is Detroit. And another team that I want to talk to after is Anaheim, because Anaheim has also been very hot. But since we're kind of in that little flow of talking about playoff teams, the Red Wings are hot right now, and they're in a playoff spot. So a little bit of that Iser plan is looking good for the first time since it's really been mentioned, to be honest. And I think Detroit's kind of in a right direction, especially in terms of their last 10, 15 games and how they've been performing. If they could keep up with that, I think that they're in a good mindset going into the deadline, which will lead them into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I just looked it up, and since hiring Todd McClellan as their head coach, their record is 17-5-2.
Speaks volumes.
I mean, I'll point this difference out. The Red Wings made this coaching change when their record was pretty bad at the beginning of the year, and they've completely flipped it. And then I'll compare it to the Bruins. You know, we didn't look that good at the beginning of the year. We get rid of Jim Montgomery, hire Joe Sacco, and it makes no difference whatsoever.
As a matter of fact, I think it hurt you guys.
Yeah, I do too. I don't agree with the decision. But the Red Wings obviously have found a guy that has built a good culture in that locker room and has figured out a way to bring the best out of their best players. And at the way they're playing, they absolutely deserve a playoff spot. We'll see how the rest of the games play out. I mean, they're only 4 points ahead of the Rangers and the Senators and the Bruins in the wild card. So it's not like they have a locked-in wild card spot. So they're going to have to keep up this really good pace that they're on right now. And if they do, they absolutely deserve a spot.
Yeah, I mean, this wild card race is going to come down to the final game. The East is so tight between Red Wings, Columbus, Bruins, Rangers, even Islanders. There's so many teams in the East that could sneak in. But going back on the Red Wings and the Iser plan, I was full of belief in it a couple years ago, and through the last two off seasons, which they may be moving on now because they have a new head coach, I did not really like what they did the last off season, bringing in a bunch of old guys like Tarasenko and Kane. They're very good, but definitely past their prime. And even when the Red Wings were doing bad earlier in the season, there was a lot of talks about Tarasenko getting traded. I think the Red Wings can make the playoffs. I think they have more than a 50% shot to, but I don't see them doing anything going far. I think they're going to be a first-round exit, and I don't really see the future in this team.
No, I mean, to be honest, I agree with your point about the playoffs. I think that they get in. I don't see them going very far. I mean, considering if they're where they're at right now, first wild card spot, that leaves them against Toronto. Put a team up against that team against Toronto. all right, granted, Toronto has a history of being bad in the first round. I think that might be the only thing that works to their benefit. But then again, you can't look back at history to constantly repeat itself.
Yeah.
I do want to chime in here real quick. I think so. The Red Wings are interesting, right? Because they're such a young team, and they're starting to kind of find their stride. If you look into the next few seasons with the prospects they have coming up, they can be a very dangerous team. So by setting a standard of being able to make the playoffs now, it can really help these young guys that they're bringing in, like Sandin Pellikka, Branson Nygaard. They have Trey Augustine, arguably the best goalie in college hockey right now.
I don't even think it's arguably. I think it's him and Cam Fowler 1 and 2.
So not only are they finding their stride right now, but it can set the tone for all these young guys that they have in their system lined up. Not to mention that Marco Kasper is also a very good young core piece that they have.
No, yeah, I mean, yeah, Dozer, you've expressed your kind of not liking the direction too much. Not liking the direction.
I do like the young players.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I like the young players.
No.
the Red Wings have.
I was gonna bring up the way that you kind of said it, how like their players right now and their prospects don't align.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Rangers in a sense, where they have got a good amount of young, decent players, and then they have a bunch of old players that are sort of leaving their prime. It's like a weird spot.
Exactly, which is kind of what I was gonna bring up, because I like when you said that. When we first had the conversation, we had that conversation back, I want to say during winter break, to be honest. And we were talking about it, and you kind of like opened up my eyes in a different way, like kind of something that I never really thought about. Obviously, you got a Dylan Larkin, he's 20 years old. Like, he's still young, but Alex DeBrincat, he's 27. Like, JT Comfort, he's 29. These guys are in their late 20s. By the time some of these younger guys come in, they're going to be in their mid-30s. So it's almost like the two primes aren't really like intermingling. But all in all, I think you get this team back in the playoffs. They made the playoffs for, what was it, 20-something straight years. I want to say it was like 23 or 28. One of those two numbers for some reason sticks out to me. They made the playoffs for that many straight years. They missed the playoffs once. They haven't been back since. Looking for their first playoff appearance since the 2017 season. And I think just getting your feet wet, getting back into the playoffs is a step in the right direction, even if you're a first-round exit.
Yeah.
Not like you're not.
I agree with that.
You're not gonna look. Okay, yeah. Obviously, the goal is to make the playoffs and to make the playoffs to win the cup. But I think you get your feet wet. You get these guys a little bit of playoff experience. Now they know what it means to play meaningful hockey.
Yeah.
Which is part of the reason that I think the Buffalo Sabres haven't been good for as long as they are, because they're so used to playing non-meaningful hockey that by the time you're at the end of the year, similar to last year, you're playing meaningful hockey in March. And meaningful hockey in March to get into the playoffs is nothing like playoff hockey.
Yeah.
So I really, I agree with your whole playoff take. I don't think that this is a team that's in win-now mode or a team that's really capable of going far unless it's some magical run, Cinderella run. But I think...
Yeah, but definitely the future is to come for that team.
They're
going to be dangerous in the
100%.
future.
Like, get your feet wet. Some of the younger guys, like you mentioned, get their feet wet, playoff hockey, then you got some other prospects come in, start filling in those bottom roles, and guess what? They could look up to the other guys that know what playoffs are like. You look at a team like Buffalo, all right, Rasmus Dahlin has been there for half a decade. You ask him, what are playoffs like? What is this building? How does this city react to playoffs? And he looks at you and he shrugs his shoulders. You know, it's like, you ask anybody what it's like, and they shrug their shoulders. It's been over a decade. So I think I really do like where Detroit's going. My only concern being a hockey fan in the Northeast, with my favorite team being in the Eastern Conference, is they're going to become like the old Detroit Red Wings and start absolutely terrorizing the league.
They very well could be with the guys they have lined up in their system. And when I'm looking at their roster right now, they have 4 guys that are 30, and everyone else is younger than them.
They're one of the youngest teams in the league, which is what makes them even more scary.
And that's with Patrick Kane and Tarasenko, and there's speculation that Tarasenko's contract could be bought out pretty soon, and I don't think Patty Kane's got that many years left. I mean, he's on a 1-year deal. I don't know if he does another 1 year with them or if he decides to hang him up. They're such a young team. It's looking very dangerous for what they can do when they bring in all these prospects and kind of maximize that potential that we know they can have.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the other team that I really wanted to kind of touch base on is the Anaheim Ducks. I think the Anaheim Ducks have been a very quietly good team. Obviously, they're not up there in terms of standings, but in their last 10, they're 7-2-1. They've been on quite a tear, to be completely honest, like pretty quietly. And not necessarily this team's got many hopes of going anywhere, but prior to the break, they were on a big win streak, winning like 7 of 8. Since the break, they're 1-2. They play right now against Vancouver tonight. With that being said, I think Anaheim's another team that is in the right direction, but a little bit off from being a contender, even a playoff contender. But then aside from that, John Gibson just gets hurt. I feel like John Gibson was really in the talks to be moved from Anaheim, kind of get him a new light, get Anaheim a new goalie. And after the injury, that is exactly what Anaheim did. Anaheim went out. They traded for Oscar Dansk and for future considerations. And I like that just in the sense, all right, Gibson's hurt. You're replacing him. But they also have Lucas Dostal. With Gibson hurt, I thought Dostal was going to be the starter. Give him a chance. He's, 25 years old. He's pretty young. Start getting him reps as a starter. Who knows, that could be your starter. But getting Oscar Danks now really gets me thinking. Are they planning on trying to trade John Gibson? But if they do, what exactly are they going to get for him, considering he's injured and it feels like he's been injured for the last how many years? So I feel like that's a big question mark, but a team that I kind of wanted to emphasize just a little bit because I feel like they've been on a quiet, hot tear that a lot of people are kind of overlooking.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Ducks young core. Like, they're not gonna make the playoffs this year. It'd be very surprising if they do, but they have a lot of young pieces that will continue to develop, and I think they will be good soon. But a couple, like you mentioned, Lucas Dostal, who I believe in. I think he's gonna be a good goalie, and I think he should be the starter for Anaheim. Another guy I want to talk about that doesn't get any credit and no one really knows about is Jackson Lacombe. As the Ducks have a lot of young players, and he's one of the young D-men that don't get credit. They have Olin Zellweger, and but Jackson Lacombe has really stepped up since Cam Fowler's gotten traded, and he's been honestly probably their best defenseman on that team, and he's been a big part of why the Ducks have had some light of success recently.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm looking at his stats right now, and obviously we've mentioned how Anaheim's been on the struggling side for quite some time right now. I mean, he's got just over 120 career games, and in those 123 games, he has 45 points, 11 goals, 34 assists. For a 24-year-old defenseman with not a lot of NHL experience, those are some pretty good numbers considering who he's playing for. This season alone, he's played 50 games, has 9 goals, 19 assists for 28 points, and he's a +2. That +2 means a lot because you're playing on a team like Anaheim, and you're still finding a way to be on the right side of the puck more often than not. I mean, you don't see a lot of players with plus ratings on teams like those, especially as defensemen. So that's a really good shot. I mean, Jackson Lacombe has been very good overall this season, but like you said, very underrated. I feel like 28 points in 50 games as a defenseman, especially on the Anaheim Ducks, is something that I'm not surprised it gets overlooked just because it's a team that's not really in the spotlight very often. But we've spoken about a lot of teams that have gotten kind of blown up. We spoke about how Washington scored 8 goals and 7 goals back-to-back nights. But now let's talk a little bit about Edmonton. Obviously, Connor McDavid scores the golden goal. He does what a lot of people expected but hoped he wouldn't do. And now he goes back to the NHL, back to reality, and it's really not going his way. Edmonton has looked actually terrible, to be completely honest. They lose 6-3 to Philadelphia on Saturday. Then the following night, they lose 7-3 to Washington. Connor McDavid said earlier today, he goes, I'd be lying to you if I felt good out there. That's coming from the best player in the world, someone who just came off of arguably one of the, I think his biggest win of his hockey career as of right now, that Four Nations win.
Mm-hmm.
And he's coming back kind of, I don't want to say the Four Nations was a step ahead of the NHL, but I feel like in terms of intensity, in terms of skill level,
yes,
it was definitely a step ahead in terms of the players that he was seeing from shift to shift. He's not going up against Tom Wilson. He's going up against Matty Tkachuk or Brady Tkachuk, who I feel like is a Tom Wilson and some.
Yeah, I think it definitely could be a little bit of like a Four Nations hangover type of deal. But you would think that coming from games with that high of intensity, that he would be able to come back to the NHL and almost look unbelievable and unrecognizable. Like he would just be dancing around these guys because he'd have so much more space and time, and the game wouldn't. He's not playing in a game 7 in a regular season NHL game. Like the intensity level, like we just kind of said, it's not going to be as high. So you would think he'd almost be able to stand out a little more. Granted, it's not just him who looks bad; their whole team looks bad. And we were throwing around John Gibson's name before he got hurt. I think the Oilers could benefit from a guy like him.
I don't disagree with that, but the one thing I'll say is that Edmonton already confirmed that they're riding with Stuart Skinner. So I feel like I
think that they did say that. They're riding with Stuart Skinner. I know that. But John Gibson right now, injury.
Trade value's down.
He's probably really down. I wouldn't put it past the Oilers to trade for Gibson as a backup.
Like they always have goaltending problems, so why not try to get someone who's like pretty established while their value's lower than usual?
I don't hate it, but my whole thought process is also the fact that Gibson's very injury prone. It's like, all right, Stuart Skinner might not be the most reliable at times, but
that would be perfect load management.
But at the end of the day, he brought you to Game 7 of a Stanley Cup final. John Gibson, I feel like he's always getting hurt. I don't want to call him like a Mark Stone of goalies, but I feel like around trade deadline, there's always talks about him moving, and then he's always on the LTIR somehow.
I agree.
So,
I agree with everything you're saying, but the one thing you did say is Skinner led them to Game 7. In that postseason run, Skinner didn't start every game. They had Calvin Pickard in for the first couple series, and he actually got them a couple wins and stole them a couple games.
No,
Yeah.
definitely. That is a fair point. That is a fair point. I don't hate Edmonton reaching out to get Gibson. I just don't think it's as concrete. Like, if they were to get him, hypothetically, I don't think it's as concrete as a lot of people would think, and I hope it is because I love Gibson as a goalie.
Yeah.
I just don't think, from a team's perspective, I don't think that it's as set in stone of what you're going to get than it really is, because I think the Gibson has really shined some light when he plays, but his injuries could really overshadow everything that he does. Because what good are you going to do in a press box if you're not on the ice?
Yeah, but I would just say that it would be very beneficial for the Oilers to be able to have a tandem of goaltenders rather than just rely on one to play 60 games and then try to lead them in the playoffs. So if you can figure out, like almost like what the Bruins did with Swayman and Ullmark, where you just split almost every other game or give a guy 2 games, give a guy a game, you're keeping them both active. Like Skinner can be a starter in the NHL. You match him with a guy like Gibson.
No, if it could be like a 1A, 1B type situation, I think Skinner would benefit from something like that greatly. Yeah.
Because then Gibson would possibly and hopefully be less prone to injury because he's not playing every game.
Yeah. No, 100%. But kind of on the topic of trades, I feel like a name that was really out there, or I feel like at the top of the trade market has been Brock Nelson for quite some time. Mikko Rantanen gets traded from Colorado to Carolina, and now all of a sudden he's at the top of the trading block. A lot of rumors, a lot of reports that he might not want to sign in Carolina. They've reportedly already offered him a contract worth $100 million, an 8-year by $12.5 million a season. But I kind of want to get you guys' thoughts. We said last week that we didn't really think that there would be a chance of Rantanen getting traded prior to the deadline. You don't make a move for a player like that without the certainty or without the expectations of re-signing him. So I kind of want to hear through the last few days what you guys have seen and kind of your thoughts on what you've seen regarding Rantanen.
For me, I almost feel like no matter what team Rantanen lands on, I think he's going to test free agency, almost like what Marner's agent is saying about the Leafs, and that even whatever they offer him, I think he's going to test free agency to see what he gets. I think the Hurricanes would be dumb to hold on to him and not know if he's going to resign. If they don't have a deal done by the deadline, I feel like you got to get rid of him. You're giving up too many assets for a questionable return, and then you're almost putting yourself in a hole because you're giving away valuable assets like Marty Necas, who's been ripping it up with Colorado, to get a guy that you're gonna have for who knows how many playoff series, and then to walk to wherever he wants. So I feel like he's got to get dealt. A team that I really think would benefit from him if they can figure out how to manage the salary cap would be the Stars, because they always seem to make it to the Western Conference Finals and then lose. Or they make it to the playoffs, get to the second round, lose. I think you bring in a guy like Rantanen, who's big, physical, knows how to score. He can get them over that hump. Their line depth with adding him would be ridiculous. Remember, Sagan's still on the LTIR, so if he's able to get back for playoffs as well.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I kind of want to chip in, not to cut you off, but
sure.
I was doing an assignment, and I kind of had to look into the Dallas Stars, San Jose Sharks trade from the 1st of February. And that trade revolved around Granlund and CeCe going to the Stars. That trade I thought was perfect because it came after the Sagan and Heiskanen injuries. Both really good replacements for the players that were hurt, but one emphasis that I made was both of them were a lot cheaper than the players that got hurt. Sagan's contract is over $9 million. Heiskanen's over $8 million. Granlund is at $5 million, and then Cody Cece's at $3 and change. So with that being said, they have more money to play with now. Come trade deadline.
I forgot about that with the LTIR.
They have $4 million right now alone.
Yeah.
So now think about it. You make a trade for Rantanen just as a rental. But my whole argument is they gave up their first round pick this year in that San Jose trade. They gave up their first and third. Or first and fourth, third rounder if they make the final. But they do have next year's.
Yeah.
So now it's just a matter of, if you move it, is Carolina going to be willing to take next year's first rather than this year's first? Which I think is kind of, it's a risky play, granted the kind of draft depth that there is in this year's draft.
Yeah, well, going back on the Rantanen thing and the Hurricanes, I think the Hurricanes are almost in an impossible spot.
Yeah.
Because they did the same exact thing last year with Gensel, and you see how that worked. They lose in the first round, and then they lose Gensel for nothing after trading all the picks and prospects, and now they trade even more Marty Necas for Rantanen. And I could argue that I think the East is even more wide open this year, and they made that Rantanen trade that thought they were going to push him over the edge. Rantanen's played 8 games, only with 3 points for the Hurricanes so far. And now I think they're questioning on what to do. As I agree with Melks' point, how I think Rantanen is going to test free agency no matter what, no matter if he gets traded again or not. And I think if I was the Hurricanes, you said you think he has to trade. If I was the Hurricanes, I think you have to keep him. I think you've been in the same recurring theme of losing in the first or second round in the playoffs, and you make this move to get over the hump and try to win a Stanley Cup. How are you just gonna go and trade a top 10 player away just because you think he's gonna leave you? Especially after you did the same thing last year and let him walk for nothing.
The only thing that I would agree with you about that is no matter what the Hurricanes try to do, the value that they're gonna get for Rantanen won't equal what they had to give up to get him.
That
would be my argument for why you would keep him.
That's what we were talking about a little bit before the podcast, and that's kind of what I kind of put into light. I was saying how no matter what you get, hypothetically you trade Randon, you're not going to get half of what you gave up for him back.
Yeah.
So at that point, that's where I agree with your point in keeping him, because if you think that he's just going to walk, guess what? Go out there, win a Stanley Cup with him, and then you got a chance to re-sign him. That's the end goal. You know what I mean? Like, it's a risk-reward situation, but no matter what, it's a risk-reward. If you trade for him, think he's not going to sign, you trade him again, you're not going to get half of what you got back. Now what you gave up is nothing.
And then now you're missing out on 2 roster players. You traded away
Yeah.
Nietzsche's to get Rantanen, and now you're missing out on Rantanen on your right wing. That is 2 top 6 forwards right there that you just lost, and I don't know what you would get back for Rantanen. Definitely a NHL player, caliber player.
I kind of have a question for you guys that I want to see what your responses are. So, obviously the Hurricanes, very tricky spot, right? They offered him an 8x12.5, and I think that's also close to what the Avs offered him, if I'm not wrong. If you're the Hurricanes, do you just try to give him a deal that he can't refuse before free agency? Because in free agency, who knows what that number can get up to? Like, would you guys be willing to offer Rantanen right now an 8x14? If you're the Hurricanes,
They can't offer him 8 years. But
or 7 years by
Yeah.
14. Would you guys?
Well, actually, the
legitimately
Hurricanes
send
are the
that?
only team that could sign him to an 8-year deal.
I thought he had.
Is that right? I
Yeah.
thought you have to be tenured.
No.
Okay.
Oh,
No.
okay. Well,
If the players rostered on your team, you could sign him to an 8-year deal. If any other team signed him, then it would be 7.
Okay.
so would you guys, if you're the Hurricanes, try to give him a deal like that?
That's the thing. Like, I personally, I'm just taking a quick look at their roster, see who's UFA. But personally, right now, I think I would. With Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, and Seth Jarvis all signed long-term. I don't know about an 8-year, $14 million deal, but I'm willing to give him that money on a shorter contract. I'd give him a 3-4 year deal worth $14 mil.
What if his terms aren't? What if he wants that long-term deal though?
Well, then, if he wants that long-term, I'd say prove it till the end of the year, and we'll give him that money. Because right now, you look at the 2 players that were involved in the trade. You look at Mikko Rantanen and you look at Nietzsche's. Nietzsche's over point per game at Colorado. Mikko Rantanen isn't performing half at what he did with Colorado. But then again, you got him for a reason. It takes players some time to adjust to their new environments, which I completely agree with that. I think I'd be willing to give him that money due to the fact that a few of pretty much my main forwards are locked up for the next 3 years after this season's over. I'd be willing to give him a 3-4 year contract, say, hey, prove it, and then your next contract will be X, Y, Z, or whatever, because the salary cap's also going up. You got to remember that.
Yeah, if he played exceptional, he could get.
You know what I mean? It's like signing a 3-4 year deal could be
18,
a
20.
grand slam for him.
That's true. What
Like,
about you, Dozer?
Because, I'm sorry, before I finish my thought,
Sure.
Rantanen is also only 28 years old. He got drafted the same draft as McDavid. You know what I mean? So he's still young. You give him a 3-4 year deal, that brings him to 31, 32. He signs his last contract when he's like, I guess at the peak of his prime, kind of down a little bit from the top of his prime at 30, 32 years oldish. You sign another 4 or 5 year deal at a little bit more than what this one was.
That's why I would argue for him to take a long-term deal.
Now, that's so. What you're going back on your question? My
Yeah.
thoughts is, if I was the Hurricanes, I would 100% do anything I can to try to re-sign him. And going on the 8 years, if it was going to 7, 8 years, I think the 14 mil I would give in a 3 to 4 year contract in a heartbeat. If it went to 7 or 8, I think anything around 13 to 13 and a half, I would just do it. And I keep bringing this point up, but if I was a fan of the Hurricanes and we went out and traded for Jake Gensel and he left, and now we trade for Rantanen and we don't win a cup and he leaves, I would be like, what's going on? We're just trading for all these good players and letting them walk it.
And they're not all good players. They're all superstars.
Yeah.
Like the Rantanen will be the biggest name moved this this regular season, and it was way before the trade deadline.
And then there's kind of that stigma around the Hurricanes that they're just bringing you into.
But that's the thing. It's like I don't necessarily think that. It's just more of.
Or it's a destination that players don't want to re-sign. You have that stigma too.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely could, but I feel like Carolina is a destination that a lot of players want to go to. Just in general, like in terms of winning. In terms of winning, like I'm not looking at the whole like financial like business side of it. Like I don't know what players' contracts withhold and how like taxes and all that. I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at players that want to win where they want to play. I'd want to play in Carolina if I wanted to win a Stanley Cup. I'm gonna be honest. Looking at what they have, their depth, their like the age of their roster, and Mikko Rantanen's still young. He's the same age as Connor McDavid.
Yeah.
So signing a 3-4 year deal, I think, is the most ideal for both parties, because after the 4 years, he either proved that he's worth $14 million and you give him just that again with even more salary cap room, or you say, you know what, we thought you'd be better. You try to move him, or you let him walk, whatever it might be after that contract's over.
That's why if I was him, I would try to argue with getting a long-term deal so I can make the most bang for my buck.
See, but I don't think okay, yeah, I guess there's an argument on both sides.
If you can lock up $120 million over 7-8 years compared to racking up 50-60 over 4 and then possibly not signing a deal worth as much after, which, I don't think really would happen, but it's not out of the cards that, things don't go his way in Carolina,
Yeah. No,
especially
I agree
moving
with that.
from a guy like playing with McKinnon to now you're the one sole guy. Like you're the almost McKinnon of your team in a sense.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, but I think it could go either way. I think that I do think that there's an argument for either side. That was just kind of my thought process, what I would want if I was Rantanen or the front office of the Hurricanes. But I think that they have the pieces that they need locked up for long enough to make a playoff push, both on offense and defense. So I think that that's going to kind of be interesting, see how it plays out. It's going to be obviously the main talk of free agency if he gets there. I mean, the same way that Steven Stamkos was the talk last year. Now it's just a matter of seeing what happens this year. But regardless of whether he signs or not in Carolina, when he tests free agency, if he were to move, what's a destination that you guys could see him going to, or you'd like to see him go to? Because right now I'm looking at, I think both of my answers are pretty basic and pretty obvious, but just looking at salary cap, looking at teams that are kind of in that headspace to get that one superstar, really get their franchises rolling, I'd either say San Jose or Chicago.
I was going to say, if he doesn't get dealt at the deadline, if he gets dealt at the deadline, I would love to see him play for the Stars. If he goes to free agency, I think
I'm talking next season.
I think you got to put him with the young. I think the teams with the most cap, like Chicago or the Sharks, got to give him a big time deal. I would love to see Bedard play with someone who's actually a top 6 forward instead of Ryan Donato and Tyler Bertuzzi.
Yeah, I agree. I think Chicago's should be throwing money at almost any forward
Marner
they possibly
too. Yeah,
can. I think if Marner is there, Chicago will be. I want to say, I don't have a team in mind, but I think there's going to be a lot more suitors than we might expect for next offseason just because of the salary cap moving up and teams realizing this and making moves so they could bolster them up for the future, like getting rid of some worse contracts to just get huge names like Rantanen, as all these teams that are going to be Stanley Cup favorites are going to have $5 million in cap room just off moving nobody. So we might see a team in the playoffs that have $10 million in cap room to spend and make a move to make have space for Rantanen. I want to say the Red Wings could. They have a lot of expiring contracts. I know,
and they have just under $3 million in cap right now.
They have a lot of guys on their entry levels.
I mean, even the Jets have just over $2.5 million in cap room.
I mean, but listen to this. We were talking about the Penguins earlier. If they wanted to make a move for Crosby, they have $10 million in cap space right now. If they get rid of Rickard Rakell, Erik Karlsson, plus the cap jumping up. They could try to get him.
Let's move on to the Penguins. Let's talk about the Penguins, and they have a lot of things that they could sell on.
They have a ton.
lot of
Yeah.
things we could talk about.
I mean, right off rip, we kind of spoke about how Crosby's there to stay. So is it safe to say Crosby's a Penguin?
Yeah, he's
There's-
not on the block.
There is no trade conversation surrounding Sidney Crosby. I just want to be on the same page on that because I really don't think there's a chance. But you kind of look at Pittsburgh's goaltending. They've had, since the fall of Marc-Andre Fleury going to Vegas and Matt Murray being Matt Murray, it feels like goaltending's been a big question in Pittsburgh. Are there any moves in mind that either you guys have that kind of surround goaltending, or do you guys think that most of their moves are going to be done up front to kind of help Crosby kind of compete?
I was more thinking about helping Crosby up front than their goaltending wise.
Yeah, no, I mean,
To be honest,
I agree. The only reason why I brought up goaltending is also just the fact that, I mean, Tristan Jarry is a proven non-playoff goalie.
yeah,
I don't
So-
even think he's on the
yeah.
roster.
No, I don't even think-
I think they
I don't-
bought him out.
Yeah.
No, they did, but my point is that's who they've been riding with. They started the season with him. They got rid of Casey DeSmith. So right now it feels like they're kind of stuck right from the tail end of their team. Right from goaltending up, they're kind of stuck.
They need help everywhere.
And that's
though.
what
the
I feel like. I feel
problem.
like there's one team that could really compete with how bad the Penguins are doing right now, and that's Buffalo, and that is not a team you want to be compared to. So, I mean,
I think both teams don't have a direction that they're going, and I think both teams need to decide a direction.
yeah, I,
Buffalo's been in a stagnant point for the last 2-3 seasons with their young players not making moves, and the Penguins have been in a stagnant point with their old players not making
Yeah.
moves.
so it's like right now, obviously you got Nedeljkovic and you got Blomqvist, but neither of them are proven NHL goalies, or at least starters. With that being said, they'll get to goaltending when they get to it. I don't think that's anywhere near where it should be for an NHL team. But looking at the forwards, the first name that I really look at that I would be more than willing to move, and I think not you could get a whole lot for him, but I think you could get a few late round picks. You can maybe get a half decent prospect. I'd move an Anthony Beauvillier. I feel like he's a player that since he left the Islanders, he's been tossed around to a few different teams, but he's a player that's been provenly pretty good in the playoffs. He scored a couple big goals for the Islanders. I feel like generally he's proven that he could perform at the playoff level. With that being said, I feel like that's a cheap option for teams to go and get from the Penguins. The Penguins might not get too much to improve, but hey, those late round picks, those are still something. So I feel like that would be one piece that I'd be willing to move right away. And then aside from that, the Penguins really have a lot of guys locked up for the majority of the next couple seasons. Cody Glass is a restricted free agent next season, unrestricted free agent the year after that. So we'll see what they do with that. Beauvillier's contract's expired after this year, which is why I mentioned him. And then, I mean, Matt Grzelcyk isn't as valuable. I feel like he's decreased in value since he left the Bruins. I really like Grzelcyk on the Bruins. I think he played a really solid defensive game. I just don't see the same out of him in Pittsburgh. So I think Kyle Dubas, it goes back to what you were saying before, I feel like Kyle Dubas has a lot of options. It's just a matter on how he plays his cards because it's not like he has a lot of expiring contracts. He needs to figure out the best moves to kind of move contracts from his end to another team's end, which is obviously more tricky than being like, hey, here's a rental. If you want to re-sign him, go ahead. I'll take a third and a fourth, and we'll call it a day. Now you're trying to move a contract, which could hurt certain teams. Not every team has a few million to play with.
Yeah.
So, obviously, the question was brought to light for a reason. I kind of want to hear what you guys think the Penguins should do or what you'd like to see them do.
Yeah, I think the Penguins are in one of the worst spots in the NHL. As from a management perspective, they don't have any young really pieces. They don't really have any good trade value pieces to even like reboot this team. And if I was a fan of the Penguins, I would probably want them to sell. They got Brian Rust. They could trade Ricard Raquel, or two forwards that are having great years just by playing with Crosby that they could probably get some value out of. See, and if I was a Penguin fan, I would want that, but then what happens with Sidney Crosby? Like, then you just leave Crosby on a team with a bunch of nobodies and watch him end his career on a bottom feeder team.
Yeah, no, which is kind of why I brought up what I brought up with the contracts, because I agree with you. O'Brien, Russell, Ricardo, Carl, they have some trade value. They're pieces that I think could be moved for decent assets. But aside from looking at Crosby being surrounded by nobody after those players are moved, both of those players are signed for $5 million plus for both of them actually for 3 years after the season's over. So now you got two players in their early 30s signed for another 3 years, signed until their mid-30s at over $5 million. I understand the cap's going up, but now you got to look back and be like, if you're the team trading for these players, are these players that you see a future with them? If not, I feel like that's going to be a hard contract to kind of flip in the offseason, not necessarily for the player, but it goes back to how much salary cap does every team have. And $5 million isn't a little money, a little bit of money. That's a half decent amount of money, which is kind of my concern right now. But I do agree. I even think a player like a Michael Bunting could get traded. I mean, he's got 1 year left on his contract. I feel like that might be their best direction in terms of value and in terms of contract. But then again, Michael Bunting's been hurt. Teams are taking a chance with Michael Bunting. I mean, you're taking a chance with anyone, but especially a player that's been hurt. You never know what you're going to get. A player like Kevin Hayes, I could see them moving him. About $3.5 million contract. He has 1 year left. Move him. If he's a rental this year and he finishes that last year with another team, so be it. But I completely agree with your point that Pittsburgh might very easily be in one of the worst spots out of anyone in the National Hockey League. And it's kind of sad to see how far they've come over the last 8 years, 7, 8 years. They were a team that every team feared, and now they're a team being compared to the Buffalo Sabres. And they were the top dog when the Sabres were still in the same exact spot.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Dubas did not step into a very good situation. I mean, like you two just explained, there's not much they can do, and they could be. If I was them, I feel like you have to be big time sellers here. I know you want Crosby to like end out on some fairy tale like Cinderella maybe run type thing, but even I think they got a big rebuild heading ahead of them, and no matter what move they really make, I don't see them flipping into I don't see them flipping into a playoff team within the next 2 to 3 years when Crosby, even if he is still a point per game player, I think this is going to be a big rebuild that they have ahead of them.
I half agree with you, and then you kind of got me to 3/4 agree with you because of some that you said. I agree. I think that a big rebuild is heading in their direction, and I also don't think that it's going to be within the next 3-4 years because that's how long they have some of their key guys signed for. With that being said, I feel like when you have that many of your key guys being signed on multi-year contracts, those are hard contracts to move. And if you don't move those contracts, if you don't move those players, where exactly does your rebuild start? You know what I mean? It's not like you have the assets in the minors either to kind of call guy. All right, you got Rucker McGroarty, but
he doesn't even. Yeah.
No, but that's my point. That's arguably their biggest asset in the minors. So it's almost like if you can't call a player like that up while this team is struggling to the extent that they are, what makes you think that he's gonna kind of shift over easily without a core group that Pittsburgh has right now?
I don't know.
I really think like we're kind of getting stumped on like what to say about Pittsburgh right now because of the situation that we're in. Like we're trying to brainstorm and think what this team could do to better their situation.
I know what they could do actually.
Oh, I'd love to hear this idea.
Let's hear it, Milks.
They got to get rid of Crosby. That's the only way.
That was
I mean,
literally what I
listen,
was
That's
going
the
to say.
that's the
Yeah.
only way.
I mean, listen, that's
Crosby would bring back a lot of assets, but
You
Crosby
could
would
get
big-
Crosby for a lot.
Crosby-
Still at his age.
I mean, listen, it goes back to what you said. Crosby is still a valuable asset in the NHL. He could help any team win. Right now, it's on him. He does not want to leave Pittsburgh. If he wanted to leave Pittsburgh,
He could go to a cup contender easily.
he could go. Oh my God! Imagine
and he's not even on a big contract either.
eight
Anyone could take
7,
him.
8-7. That is nothing for a player of his caliber. Like,
I would give up the house for him.
yeah, yeah, no, exactly. So it's more or less Sidney Crosby. Like, imagine him going to Colorado.
That'd be stupid.
4 nations in the NHL.
McCarr, McKinnon, Crosby.
And Devontae's. Boom. That's literally 4, like, three of 5 power play pieces.
Like, yeah, that would be crazy.
So yeah, I
And
mean,
Natchez. I don't even think we said Natchez, did we?
no,
Imagine
no,
that
but
power play.
well, yeah, but he wasn't on that. I mean, that would be their power play. I was talking 4 nations power play, but Nate just would be on that power play, yeah. But I mean, overall, I don't think there's really a good situation for Pittsburgh other than the fact that they have 2 first-round picks this year. And then
That's
they have a first and 2 seconds in the following 2 years, in 26 and
They
27.
better hope that lottery
So-
works in their favor.
That's the thing.
Maybe they can try to get a guy like. Maybe they can get an NHL ready player. I don't know. It really depends on how the standings shape out and how the lottery goes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's a lot to kind of there's a lot surrounding the trade deadline and a lot surrounding a lot of teams. Right now, I think the Penguins are going to be one team that's kind of just
I
at a
don't think they're-
deadlock.
Yeah.
I don't really think that the Penguins are going to do much because I don't think that they have many valuable assets to benefit many teams, but I also don't think that receiving anything other than something that's going to benefit them in the future, like they don't need anything right now. You know, so I don't think Pittsburgh can make any moves, but we are exactly 8 days away from the trade deadline. We will be on spring break when trade deadline comes, so we won't be able to sit and talk about it. We'll talk about it in a couple weeks on the episode, but I'm very excited. I feel like the trade deadline's always something that's surrounded a lot of hype, especially the last few years, especially this year with the trades that have occurred prior to the trade deadline. So I think there's a lot to look forward to through the next 8 days. I feel like a lot of teams are going to be very sneaky. I feel like teams are just going to come out of nowhere and it's going to be like, oh, wow.
I love that though.
I mean, don't you remember last year spring break when Timo Meyer went to or not
It
Timo
was
Meyer, meant
Hurdle.
Thomas Hurdle
Yeah,
went
I
to
knew it.
Vegas.
We were all
Yeah.
shook by that.
Yeah, like we were in Florida, we look at the TV and it's like, oh
Well,
wow, look at what
Vegas
happened.
made
well,
another
well.
move.
Let's hope Mark Stone doesn't hit the LTIR before this trade
I
deadline.
mean, he might. I actually heard a little rumor that him lifting the cup hurt his shoulder.
I heard he herniated another disc in his back. So, but
But,
he'll be back for game 1 of the playoffs.
Just in time per usual. But I mean, with the last couple minutes that we have, I just want to touch up on our Division 1 teams here at Sacred Heart. The men's team, they're currently in second place in the Atlantic Hockey Conference. They're sitting 3 points behind Holy Cross, both with 28 games played. Sacred Heart has looked half decent, I think. Like we've been saying the last couple weeks, I think they have a real chance at making the tournament this year. And I think just as seniors, that would be a really cool experience to kind of see our team, kids that we know, kids that we're friends with, play on that stage. As we've said before, Felix Trudeau leads the team in points. He has 38 and 34. Second up is John Jaworski with 26 and 34 games. And then defenseman Mikey Adamson continues his tear with 11 goals, 15 assists for 26 points. I think Mikey Adamson, I mean, hands down, most improved player. I mean, from last year, he was an absolute stud last year as well. But I think what he's done this year has been absolutely incredible. Then looking over at our women's team, they currently are tied for second place in the Nuha, which they're actually tied with Franklin Pierce, 51 points in 28 games. LIU is in a 6-point lead with 57 points. This weekend, they open up their playoffs. Actually, tomorrow they open up their playoffs at home at Martiri. Game 1 and 2, Friday, Saturday night. And then, if needed, a Game 3 will be held on Sunday. So a lot to look forward to in terms of NHL hockey, a lot to look forward to in terms of Sacred Heart Division 1 hockey. And that is all the time we have for the third episode of Three Gyms Talk Hockey. Unfortunately, we won't be in the studio next week. It will be our spring break, but we will be back the following week to talk about everything that happened over the trade deadline and whatever else occurred throughout the games. We'll talk about our Division 1 teams and how they performed in their playoffs, if they're moving on or if they're going home. So a lot to get to in a couple weeks when we're back. But once again, I'm Salam Mijas alongside Mike Cardoza and Matt Milko, the Three Gyms podcast. Till next time, see ya.
Peace.